Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Committee of the Land and Buildings. It is 6:15, and I'll open the meeting. And present we have Mark Haynes, myself. Henry Lippman is absent right now, but is on his way. And Cheryl will be the one that will be keeping the minutes for tonight's meeting. So tonight, we're here to discuss the parking garage and to get some new estimates that have been done on it, and to see what direction we might be going on the parking garage. So at this time, I'm going to ask Wes Colby, the Public Works Director, to give us a lowdown of what was discovered there.
Before we begin the presentation, when we get to the discussion point, I have Robert Durfee here from DuBois and King. They're the ones who actually did the estimate and did the analysis. So if we have any technical questions, we'll be bringing him up.
Okay, sounds good, Wes.
Okay.
Oh, before you start, everybody should have a packet that Wes made for us, and a binder, I believe. Okay, so all the information that Wes is going to give us is in here. Okay, Wes, thank you.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so tonight is to talk about parking garage alternatives, and there's just a couple of pictures there for orient everybody in regards to that's the second deck of the parking garage. We're going to cover really the background, plus the proposed work, some alternatives that are out there, and then really the rest of it's just discussion of what I see and where the council should consider what actions to take. The parking garage as ownership is really ground level buildings and ground level parking lots, privately owned. We own the second deck, we own the third deck, and the structure that supports it, as well as the two stairwells, and the facade is divided between the two of us depending upon where the line is, and that's who does the work. Okay, current condition, a lot of it you can see. I just want to talk a little bit about the ramps and the decking. Basically, it's a composite structure. It's concrete with a metal deck. Metal deck has to be there as part of the strength process. So what you're seeing there is the metal deck has deteriorated from rusting. We have used timber to give it the strength that it needs to hold up the concrete. So that's what you're seeing there is the timber cribbing that's holding up the deck on the ramps. And in the case of my left, your left, that is holding up the actual parking deck portion. Proposed scope of work that was included in the estimate included repairing structural steel where it needed to be, mainly on the ramps, landings, and transition areas, complete removal of the decking, replace and removal of the parapet walls and replacing of that. And then the deck itself where the car's parked, remove and replace decking where necessary, and waterproof and repave the second deck, and then reseal the third deck. Then a new exterior stair tower with an elevator, and then repair the existing stairwells, change doors and add windows, and then paint and lighting improvements to make it lighter inside, and then do some facade work. What that means cost-wise, if we rehabilitate both decks, it's around $4.5 million, or roughly about $19,600 a space. That includes the cost of design. You'll see one of the options that we can talk about was really rehabilitating just the second deck and using the third deck as a roof. There's really not much difference in cost, roughly about $700,000. It's $3.8 million roughly, and about $16,000 a space. And I got an extra number in there. It includes the cost of design. Building new. DuBois and King looked at some of the more recent projects that built garages and used the median piece, go back, cost estimates of how they designed it and whatever, and $30,000 was that median per space. So for roughly the same amount of parking spaces that we have, it's going to be about around $10.8 million. But that does not include any cost associated with what we're going to do with the old parking garage, whether remove it, demolish it, or whatever. It's just the cost of building new. On the other side, there are some privately owned costs for the ground level parking and improvements to that. That's approximately $73,000. So we're available for discussion, but I wanted to bring up some of the discussion points. One is the estimate, trying to get an idea of what the preferred alternative is going to be. Do we want to consider alternative parking while it's under construction? Because we'll basically lose the second deck while the parking garage is being renovated. What source is available for funding the project? And is the charge for parking sufficient that we can cover the bond payments? And then we need to consider if we are charging for it, we're going to have some annual cost for a parking management system. I just ran some numbers just to see what order of magnitude that's out there from the regards to being able to cover it if we do charge for parking. We estimate that about the life will be between 25 and 30 years, so we set a 20-year bond. Annual principal payments around $226,000, depending upon the bond and how much we actually do bond. With 231 spaces, if we make the assumption that we generate $5 per day per space, with 365 days and looking at different occupancy, depending on if it's a weekday or weekend, it is possible to cover the cost of the principal payments for the bond from charging for the parking in the parking garage. However, if the ground level parking in every other parts of the city are free, you probably won't get enough customers in your parking garage to pay for your bond payments. So it's just something you're going to have to consider. And then there's annual operation costs for keeping the parking garage up that would have to be considered at some point and may want to put into the cost of that you want to generate revenue for. Conceptual timeline, why? We do still have some interim maintenance requirements. Every year we inspect the parking garage to make sure there's no safety problems with the ramps, that we have to readjust the cribbing or add more cribbing to it. From a timeline standpoint, it's 1 year for design, permitting, getting all the approvals, public hearings, bids. We believe it's a 2-year construction project. During the one summer, we'll do all the decks and the ramps. The next summer, we'll come in, we'll do the facade, the stairwells, and the exterior tower. And then, so that means you could use it at the end of year 1, but the project's not complete to the end of year 2. And that's what we see for it. Subject to your questions, I'll go back to the dollar slide.
Okay. What, and probably Bob could help us out with this, is the, what's the condition of the garage as it is right now,
You want to answer that piece from the structural standpoint?
from a structural standpoint?
Structural standpoint, it's in fair to poor condition. The ramps are in very poor condition. They're beyond rehabilitation in our opinion, so our rehabilitation plan and the cost estimate includes a total removal of the ramp decks and the ramp parapets, the concrete walls, repairing the steel, painting the steel, and then replacing with new decks and parapets. The second and third level parking decks are in poor condition, but only about 20% of that area is in poor condition, requiring full depth replacement of the decks. The stairways are in fair to poor condition. Most of the steel treads and risers have rusted out over the years from salt. And also the doors are in poor condition or broken or don't function. Electrical is, most of the electrical there is 1970s construction, and the electrical room is, I think, at capacity. There would need to be upgrades to the electrical system for the new lighting, which is proposed. And
So you need a whole new service coming in?
or just redo the service that's there, yes. I think there's enough power to the room, but there's been so many add-ons with the main electrical panel, it's almost impossible to figure out what goes where.
Yeah, I seen
And
pictures of
then
that. Scary.
a complete cleaning and painting of all the steel. Some of the garage paint is original 1973. Some was repainted in the early 80s, and some as late as the 90s, or I think 2004. But painted steel is just like your house. Every 5 to 10 years, you got to repaint your house. So we have quite a substantial cost estimate. I think it's $365,000 to take all the paint, all the steel down to bare metal, and then repaint with a high-tech 3-coat paint system.
How much steel do you figure needs to be replaced in that building? Roughly.
As far as what we call structural steel, beams and columns, none. That would be repaired by welding on plates.
Okay.
So maybe, just off the top of my head, less than 5% of the structural steel area needs plates. But as Wes mentioned, the deck system is composite. It's cast-in-place concrete that was placed on what we call a stay-in-place metal form. And that metal form is structural, and it's very thin. It's about a 64th of an inch thick. And when that rusts through, you lose your composite action, you lose your structural strength. There's no way to repair that. Your only option is to totally remove the metal deck in that area and replace it. And that's very costly because you have to remove the concrete as well.
Does the second floor, all the second floor have to be replaced?
No.
Okay. What
Like I said,
percentage of the floor?
probably, I think I said 20% of the
20%
area.
of the floor?
10 to 20% of the deck on the second level, and probably about 10% on the third level.
And then, how are you going to, are you gonna cold plane any of that deck and then put new decking down, or how's that gonna work on the second floor?
The second level deck acts as your roof for the commercial spaces, and I'm sure you're aware there are agreements in place that the city is responsible for maintaining the roof in a watertight fashion for the commercial space. The second deck currently is constructed of a cast and
You wanna note Henry's here, please?
place concrete deck with a waterproof membrane on top of the concrete that is original to 1973. The membrane has not been replaced. And then a 2-inch asphalt overlay. The overlay, our plan is to remove the overlay, remove the old waterproof membrane, and replace it with a high-tech new membrane. And then put the wearing, what we call the wearing surface, the 2 inches of asphalt back.
Okay. And you said that you would, part of this proposal would be to remove the ramps and the sidewalls?
Yes,
Cement sidewalls.
the concrete decks and sidewalls, and replace that.
Okay. Is there any way that the radius, at the turn radius of the ramps at the tops of each one can be widened through, if we're going to be replacing things, either make like a radius that would extend beyond the building a little bit so you could have a car turn easier?
Yes. The brief answer is yes. There's not a lot you can do to fully improve the turning radii. It's just too tight a spot, and you're bounded by Beacon Street East. But what you can do, and what was what we call a construction alternative that was looked at in 1996, was to extend the ramps and the landing one more bay further. So if you were going up the ramps and you went to the landing, you went make a first turn, the landing would be extended into the next bay, and then you could make easier turn in the second bay. And people going down the ramps, they'd be limited to a turning radius in where they are now in the first bay. So 2 lanes of traffic wouldn't be sharing the same turning bay. You extend the bays. The downside with that is when you extend the bays for the up ramp to go into the garage, now you have to eliminate parking spaces to have a travel way.
And how many parking spaces would you have to eliminate?
Haven't looked at that, but I'm guessing on probably 12 to 14 spaces per ramp landing, and there's 4, so 12 to 14 times 4. It's a lot.
48 or so, 50 spaces, huh?
Right.
Okay. The, I guess another theory is, what if we just took down the 3rd floor and made the 2nd floor the roof, which it basically is now. I guess that's the waterproofing part. But if you eliminated the top deck altogether, what would that cost to do that? Any idea?
And do what with the second deck? Just make it a roof and
Yep.
turn over ownership to the commercial?
Yeah.
Or whatever?
Possibility, I mean, we're gonna look at everything, so.
That is a practical engineering solution. It can be done. We did study that in a previous study briefly, I'd say 3 years ago. I do not recall what the cost was, the cost estimate was, but yes, it is feasible to basically remove the 3rd level deck and the columns down to the 2nd level, remove the stairwells down to the 2nd level, and install a roof membrane and make the 2nd level a roof for the commercial spaces. And
Okay, yeah, I think I found it. It was $3,880,000. Does that sound like that's part of your,
no, that wasn't
is
done.
that not that?
No, I'm saying, we were asked by, this was during Paul Moynihan's administration to look at that option and give a budget estimate. I don't recall what it is. I can try and find our report and send it to you, but I'm thinking it was more in the range of $1.5 million to $2 million to do
Do
that.
that?
Yeah.
So if we spend $4,500,000 on this, so the lifespan probably be another 20 to 30 years.
And yes, until you're into another round of major repairs.
Major repairs.
Right, and that's typical of modern garages. We do a lot of repair design and maintenance planning for garages in New England, including precast concrete, pre-stressed concrete garages, and they're the same issue. It's all about the salt.
Yeah.
It just attacks the concrete and then the steel in the concrete, and even pre-stressed concrete garages, after 20, 25 years, they're into some serious repairs based on salt damage.
This proposed repaired, does it get into replacing and redoing all the drainage and all that stuff? Or gonna just
Yes.
repair what's there?
No, well, repair the drainage, but certainly improve it. The drain grates in the garage are too small, they're broken, the lines are clogged.
Okay. Now, right now, I believe there's 2 stairways, one north and one south.
Yes.
If we build the elevator and stairway on the outside of the building, is there any law that says we gotta keep the ones on the inside? Or can you close them up and just use the outside one?
I don't know
Same with the elevator that's in there now.
I don't know the answer to that. You'd have to ask the architect, Peter Stewart, but I believe you My opinion is you'd probably have to still keep the south stair tower open and functioning. There is, code compliance that, and ADA compliance that, you could only walk so far for egress,
Okay.
for fire egress. So, it may be a question for the fire chief.
Yeah. And
But
yeah,
I suspect that you would still have to maintain at least the south stairwell.
okay, the ramps wouldn't help in that situation for egress?
They may qualify for emergency egress. You'd have to get an opinion or ruling from the fire chief
Okay.
on that.
And I believe you said that the stair treads are all rusted out on the south one, not safe for,
Some in the south one and also in the north one.
and the north one too, okay. What would be done to the facade?
Total replacement,
All the green stuff that's around it now,
right.
all the work would be
The
replaced?
framing underneath the green facade, it was timber and it's rotting. That was constructed in the 90s.
Okay. Are the top walls, are those concrete walls?
Yes,
All
it's-
concrete with some kind of wood thing around it, right? Or flashing or something over it?
There's some flashing, but obviously it's been inadequate because the water has gotten behind the facade and is rotting the timber framing.
And to build a new garage over here, it's at least $10 million, according to what we're
10.8.
told, right? For the same amount of parking spaces?
Yeah, well, not exactly. Yes. Not exactly, but yes.
Not exactly, but yeah.
I think we have around 230 spaces available to the public in the current garage. To provide 230 spaces here, but would be on a second and third level.
Plus the ground level?
But maintaining the spaces on the ground level, which is about 130, so it would be a 360 space garage for
So you'd
10.8
have the
million.
ground level plus 2 levels above that?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Yes, Henry?
I just, on the math of this, if you take out 48 spaces to make it more functional as you described, your cost comes up to about 25,000 a space on a net basis. So if we built a smaller garage with the same number of spaces, just brand new would be not that much more.
Well, I mean, that's,
Per space.
meaning we don't have to do the radius up there, but
Right.
just a thought,
Yeah.
make it more, make it easier. So the ground level itself, that's owned by the owner of the whole structure, I mean, of the retail space, correct?
The
So
ground
is
level
there-
parking is the property of the Fit Focus owner.
Okay. Is there anything down there that would be a cost-sharing thing, or,
When we did the breakdown, anything that was the responsibility of the property owner was pulled out separately, and that's that 73,000 that you see at the bottom of the slide.
okay,
So we, not counting as part of our cost, is an additional 73,000 that is the responsibility of the private property owner in regards to any improvements to his
so what does
property.
that involve? What improvements?
Basically, improvements for security underneath the ramps, if they want to keep people out from underneath it. And then some other, I'll call it cosmetic improvements, and then total redo of their ground level parking.
So is the steel members and all that there, that's the city's responsibility?
If it's holding up the deck, it's ours.
Okay.
Let me go back to the math for again. How do you get 10,000,008 for 30,000 spaces? I mean, for 231 spaces,
It's for 360 spaces.
360, okay, I missed that part, sorry.
So, you know, I guess there's different ways we can look at this, and I don't expect us to even begin to come up with an answer tonight. But Wes also needs to know, he has to have some kind of a guidance from us because he has a maintenance budget that he does every year there. So he needs to kind of know how many years he has to put this in his budget ahead of time to provide the maintenance there. If we go ahead with the repair, you know, you're looking at another 20 to 30 years, we'll be looking at that. I mean, I don't have to worry about it, but that's what it's gonna be. You know, it's gonna be there for at least 30 years. So, you know, I guess we gotta figure out which path we're gonna take. Are we gonna do the 4.5, and the longer you wait, that 4.5 grows? And, you know, to turn around and build double the cost in the parking lot, and that may not be such great use for a riverfront property, as we've discussed before, unless, you know, some way a developer or retailer or something would partner, and you kind of make a combination parking and either condos or retail or whatever, but, you know, to me, that's riverfront property is pretty valuable. Maybe sometime in the future, maybe it's not in the next 5 years, but who knows what it's gonna be in the next 10, 15, 20 years. There's no more riverfront property being made, so it's pretty valuable, I think. So there's a lot of figures here for us to look at, you know, rehabilitation, if you're gonna do all 3 decks, if you're gonna do 2 decks, you know, you're looking to take down the top deck. There's a lot of things to discuss. But have any of the committee members have any comments or questions more?
I don't.
I guess just on the option of abandoning the top deck, that has a cost to it that,
The cost to remove it, it may not be worthwhile to remove it and losing the 100 spaces or whatever they are up there. You know, so, and then if you take it off, you gotta make the second deck a roof, so you probably lose that too. Right? So
seems,
you basically, you're gonna lose the whole parking garage for $2 million or whatever it might be. And then you end up with nothing. It's known as a conundrum. If the committee right now doesn't have any further questions, and we got another 15 minutes, I'd like to open it up to maybe some of the public for a little bit of time here, and appreciate maybe not taking more than 3-4 minutes if you want to discuss something about this. So if anybody would like to come up, state your name and where you're from, and you can give us some foresight on the garage. We'd love to do that, or have you. Hi, Pat.
Councilor Hamel, councilors, Mr. City Manager. The TIF committee did meet last week with the city manager and the mayor to talk about some of the downtown parking issues. We didn't focus on the parking garage. We talked about the pay for parking issues, and I think there is a consensus, at least of the people that were at the meeting last week, that that's something that needs to be looked at. The questions obviously are, you know, how do we structure that, that payment, and how is it used? We've heard the proposal that $5 per day for the 230 spaces would provide pretty much what would be needed for a bond to cover the cost of that. Maybe that's appropriate, but again, as Mr. Anderson said, if we don't deal with the other parking, then there won't be people paying to use the parking garage. So that it's
a bigger picture than just one structure,
Oh, yeah.
and that's what we need to be looking at. I think there are some alternatives that we can explore. I know that we're going to be getting more data on the need for long-term parking downtown. The reverse angle parking, especially on Beacon Street East, has been full. That's been used very well.
Say that again?
It's been used very well.
Okay.
And the
Didn't hear him, did you?
Yeah, I didn't hear him.
Right. The Beacon Street West, not so much, and that may be just because of, the nature of the businesses around there and the properties around there. But
It's a long ways to walk from there to Main Street, you know?
it's a long way to walk from me, especially crossing that busy street. Although, the other changes on Beacon Street West have, I think, slowed down traffic substantially, which makes a huge difference for the people, especially in the Beacon Street West parking or condominium area. What I would like the city council, the committee here and the council too, is to keep in mind that this is a larger issue than just the parking garage, although that's a very important part of it. So when we're looking at solutions, that we look at the big picture as well.
Yeah, I think that's always been part of that. As you know, Dave, Council Bounds Committee has that on their list of committee items to be looking into, the paying for downtown. I think that if we go ahead with the repair on this at 4.5 million or more, that pay for parking is going to have to go along with that. And it may not just be the garage, it could be the main parking lot. But I mean, that's a discussion. It's nothing set in fire,
Right.
It's a discussion.
And
And how much it would be is a discussion.
I think the
So-
other part is, even if we don't make those changes to the garage, I think the pay for parking is something that needs to be on the table.
Yeah.
And a part of the solution to the overall issue. And I think there is, at least from the people that were at the TIF committee meeting last week, there is an agreement that that's something that the city needs to be seriously considering.
Yeah, I mean, it's a substantial amount of money to go into a garage, and to me, the people who use it, and even who use the main
Right.
lot, because we're looking to repave that, and that's several $100,000. So,
Well-
there should be some kind of a fee
Right. And
for that.
in addition to that, there's also the maintenance cost.
Exactly.
Whether it's ground level parking or the garage.
Yep.
That's a very important part of it, and we need to make sure that whatever the funding mechanism is substantially sufficient to cover that as well.
Correct. And like you say, once you get this repaired, there's a maintenance bill to it every year, and it would be substantial. And the maintenance should be done, not ignored.
Yeah, rather than every 25 years, perhaps. Something along those lines.
Okay, well,
All right,
thank you, Pat. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak to the issue, please? Yes, Dean.
Hi, I'm Dean Trefethan, the city's planning director. I may be stating the obvious, but either direction you go, there's going to be a period of time when a certain amount of parking is going to be unavailable.
Yeah, for a year.
Or more.
Yeah.
To build a new garage in the lot next to here, you're probably 2 years, from start digging until you're finalized, or a year and a half anyway. And, where do those people go in the meantime? As you know, that lot's full every day.
Yep.
But the same thing with the parking garage. And if we truly want to get serious about revitalization of the downtown, I know everybody talks about the Colonial will need parking, but there are other buildings in the downtown that are ripe for redevelopment that will also require parking. And it may be, if you were to do the choice of building a new garage, maybe the goal would be not 360 spaces, but maybe more. Maybe you go up another level altogether and create 400 and something, or whatever the numbers work out to be. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's a big picture, and there's a lot, as you said, Counselor. There's a lot to discuss, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of decisions to
Yeah,
make. in-
that's definitely part of it, is once the construction starts on that, in, you know, where the car's gonna park, but also the discussion is gonna be, how are we gonna fund it?
Right.
You know, where's the interest and principal gonna come from?
Yep, absolutely.
There's only so much money in the budget every year, so, I mean, even if we gave the okay today, it probably wouldn't even start till 2021, because you got the year of, you know, doing all the architect,
engineering,
engineering
planning,
work.
and everything else, absolutely.
everything, so, you know, it might be 2-3 years away,
Yep.
just because of the time it takes to do all the formalities.
I just wanted to reinforce the big picture,
Yeah.
big picture.
So were you
idea.
looking to put another deck on that one?
Well, I don't know if it's structurally you can do that.
Okay. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak on the parking garage? Mr. Sinclair, and as Bruce would say, nice tie.
Thank you, thank you. I'll wait for that later.
Okay.
Like you, Counselor Hamel and Counselor Haynes, when we grew up here, right through high school, we had paid parking everywhere. We had it on Union Avenue, we had meters, we had it on Court Street, we had on, not Court Street, excuse me, Church Street,
Yep.
and certainly everywhere downtown. So I as a resident, at this time a business person in downtown, see no reason why anybody should be afraid of that. And I think it's very valuable what you're talking about. But certainly, I hope nobody shrinks back from paid parking, because that's how it is in most places. And I look at Keene and Concord and, you know,
Portsmouth.
yeah,
and
it's what
everywhere.
people expect. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none. Oh,
Upstairs on?
last minute.
Sorry, I'm probably speaking out of turn.
And your name, please?
It's John Gatos, I'm from Belmont. And like I said, I'm probably speaking out of turn, but I know there's like the meeting with all you people here. Matter of fact, Charlie put in a paper about that there was a dangerous turn that should be looked at. I didn't know if this was a meeting where you guys can enforce
No,
putting some
that's
signs up.
Scenic Road, I think.
And the same thing with,
That's got nothing to do with this meeting. We're talking about the parking garage.
I know, I just.
But if
figure-
you wanna hang around, and in our agenda,
Yeah.
there's a place in there that you can discuss things that's not on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
I'm after the meeting?
during the meeting. It's gonna start in just a few minutes.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. No more questions? Okay. Is there any more comments from the committee members? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the meeting at 6:53. Thank you.